It is an entirely new year, so it's a great time to update what's going on with the Bronco. Here's a picture of roughly where it was last time that I left off in April, I believe. So we'll get to a little walk around and start at the front. This is sheet metal back on, not a whole lot going on. The engine was locked up, if I remember. But as far as body panels go, when I got it, it was in pretty good shape. The inner aprons were not good, so obviously I'm replacing those. The doors hung okay, hinges were replaced. I took out the firewall because I didn't like the way it looked. There was a lot of rust in the seams, and I just wanted to do something a little more simple. And I changed the shape of it a little bit. So we'll talk more about that later, I think. Have some new wheel tubs to replace the metal. Tried replacing that door striker post and did a bad job. So I ended up buying another one and replacing the whole metal section instead of piecing it together. Corners of the bed, rusted, pretty common. 23-gallon tank from Wild Horses, electric fuel pump, all that. I wanted to freeze it right here because this brace that's holding the bed together, I braced it like that when I got the car. The tire carrier hangs off of the right rear quarter panel and had actually flayed open the two sides of the bed. So that brace was keeping the bed gaps way too wide. I took it out, closed it up, welded the lower right post of the bed, and that closed things up nicely. Moving around over to the driver's side, a little bit of rust down here at the bottom where they brazed in some, whatever that is, brass, I don't know. Some rust from the marker lights. These rocker panels are pretty rusted, and the joint where the sheet metal of the quarter panel joins the post is a little rusty, but I'm working on that. New quick removable hinges. They were expensive and are heavy, but I think they'll be worth it. Fenders as they were, a lot of Bondo that wasn't really necessary. They did a bad job on the bodywork in general, but that's the walk around the car. Now, I know it's the engine that was the big problem, but stay with me. I got discouraged. I wanted to focus on body stuff for a while, so windshield frame, sandblasted, took apart the lift gate, and here's how it looked on the inside. Terrible shape. Well, I mean, it's forever old, so it makes sense, but the latching mechanisms, the handle, everything. A couple of broken screws here and there, but I was able to get everything out, disassembled, removed with the idea of sandblasting and Cerekoting all of this stuff. The liftgate was particularly a challenge, but was able to get it done. A lot of torch, a lot of force, a lot of time. And then the big pieces went outside to sandblast. The little pieces went in the little pot blaster that I have inside. Dashboard parts, small parts that would fit. Everything pretty much got sandblasted. Hinges, the glove box, light buckets for the signal markers. And there's everything that was sandblasted and ready for Cerekoting. Cerakote Elite. Good stuff. Interesting thing here, those weird looking strips with the welded nuts on them. Those are the hinge receiving parts for the rear liftgate. And I'm actually really proud of them. The old ones were super rusted out and garbage, and had a good time fabricating those. Here's everything coming out of the oven after it's been sprayed on and baked. Really, really hard coating, super, super thin, which is awesome for these strikers, and some before and after there for your immediate gratification. Some cool little details on random parts, Ford logos and such. Okay, file this under things that are critically important. I'm working on the emergency brake today. That's sarcasm. A little bit of a crack there. All of these connections are riveted or pressed in, so I'm gonna try and rebuild this whole thing. Well, I'm gonna do it. There is no try. There's only do. So I'm gonna drill a couple of things out, sandblast, clean up, and then I'll use, I suppose, nylon washers and nuts and bolts to hold it back together again, and then figure out how to mount it. The old rubber foot pad disintegrated. It was in good shape, sadly, so it's no longer with us, but here's how this one starts. And these pictures here mostly for my own posterity to try and figure out how this thing will go back together. It's still currently apart, January 5th, 2021. But I did drill it out, get it sandblasted. I might not even use the same e-brake, but it is a part, which I feel like is a feat in itself. Welded up, cleaned up, found a cool little date marking on the pedal, 6/27/1968. Pretty neat. A quick pause for context here. I've been working on the bodywork and rust and miscellaneous issues with the car. The engine itself, at this point in time that we're talking about, I hadn't really done anything with. I had gotten it to turn over, but that was it. I left it, didn't touch it. So overall, there's no real continuity with anything. These pictures and videos are in mostly chronological order, but for me, when working on a car like this, I kind of just go out and do whatever I feel like taking on that day. And there's big things that need to get done, like the engine, the firewall has to go in. There's sticking points that keep other things from falling into place. But overall, I kind of work on the no real rhyme or reason. It's not even the lowest hanging fruit. It's more crimes of opportunity, whatever grasps me at the moment. But everything works together. That's how building a car goes. I mean, the engine can run, but you can't have doors gapped before you have a firewall in. You can't have a firewall in before you have the doors gapped, which sounds crazy, but, you know, it's true. Everything is so interrelated that there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of tedious stuff. So sometimes I'll go off and work on the exhaust or sandblast a hinge or put a radio in or whatever. And that's just kind of the way it goes. But we'll shift gears a little bit, go inside, talk about the exhaust and some other body panels that I worked on. And while we're inside, I was doing some welding, putting on the V-bands on the exhaust, and broke my torch. So, unfortunate. Working on the tailgate, have a little bit of welding left to do. Ran out of wire, so got to get some more wire. Let's see if I can flip this over real quick. I think the other side is the better side. Not too bad. Needs finishing work. Got one hole right there. Otherwise, I think that will work. Have all these parts sandblasted, ready to go. They're going to get Cerekoted as well. I'm going to be more sparing in my application. And that's where we're at. That was all that's got done today. The tailgate was particularly challenging because the metal was so thin from nearby rust that I would create holes with each weld, but I did get them all filled in, did get them all grinded down, and I'll show you more on that later. And here's a couple of shots of those upper hinges that I made for the rear lift gate. You can see the old one's absolute trash. And then some, I think 5/16 weld nuts put on there. Now if I can go on a short diatribe for 1 second. I hate it that people spend a lot of money to just buy a part when they can fix the old one. These knobs hold the windshield to the frame, and they let you lay the windshield down. They're obviously just a bolt with a roll pin through it, so I ordered some bolts, and I ordered some roll pins, and I was able to make an old part function mostly like new again. And I didn't spend $60 on new ones. Planning on probably dipping them in acid, removing the chrome, and Cerakoting those that same grayish color as well. From there, I hopped back into some body work, welded up this old upper door frame for the passenger side door, and then I decided I might as well commit and weld the new floor and subframe to the bed. So that's what you see there, a couple of tack welds going in. Here I was able to use a ratchet strap to pull the two sides of the bed together and set those tailgate gaps. And you can see the beginnings of my tailgate mounting strap system. Another quick kind of aside here as far as the body goes. By far, the whole goal is to get the body gaps to look nice and everything lined up properly. That is a very complicated process when you have an old car, because the old panels aren't exactly straight. The top, for example, you can see the top is on here because I'm trying to align the door, but you can't align the door when the floor isn't fully welded in. So I was hesitant to weld in the floor, but I finally did. And then it's hard to tell what the door gaps should be without the fender on, so you really need the fender on. Basically, you have to have the whole car together, and then there are 3, 4, 5 variables, and you're trying to rule each one of those out to get an end product. So it's a bit of a confusing, tedious, frustrating process, but it's part of the deal. It's an ongoing process as we speak, but that is what it is. So everything kind of works together. And I know there's a bit of a logical step of things you do. Obviously, you want the floor to be welded in and the door pillars and posts straight before you go crazy with that stuff. But, you know, old car, some old rust issues that were fixed. There's a lot of beating with a hammer. There's a lot of pushing hard. A little bit of human force involved. So that's the way it goes. And I've given up any hope that it's going to be a show car. I don't want it to be. I want it to be pretty close and look good. I want the door gaps to be nice. I want things to look like they fit well and be functional. But a show car, it is not. This is going to be a driver. Shifting gears, no real pun intended, to the engine itself. You'll note in a couple of the past pictures the valve covers maybe look a little bit different. I'll go through what that whole deal was. Basically, it was just an idea I had because I didn't want to buy new valve covers and I didn't want to have a normal looking engine, I guess. And because I was procrastinating from dealing with actual engine problems, so I thought I would do something that was useless but looked cool. So here's a couple of shots of the normal valve covers. They're a fiber reinforced plastic essentially from Ford. They're pretty hardy, pretty durable. But I wanted to make them blue. And if prior lessons were any indication, Cerekote is a fantastic tool with which to do that with. So I looked up some of their products and they make an air cure line of their stuff that you don't have to bake. I thought I'd give it a try. So I went through all the prep work, pulled the covers off, sanding, did some actual sandblasting, all sorts of stuff. And they turned out kind of okay. Spoiler alert, I put the coating on too thick and it bubbled up, and you'll see what that kind of looks like. But again, it's a driver. I don't really care. It looks cool. I'm happy that I did it. Switched over to these, what do you call these, valve covers. Need to get that breather tube out. Otherwise, there are rubber seals pressed in place for the coils and the cam phaser sensors. Pressing those out with a simple bearing tool, one of them over there, and then these are going to get cleaned up, lightly blasted, and then we're going to try to Cerekote them using an air coat version of their product. And so it goes with the photographic representation of what happened. Again, I applied it too thick. You'll see that here in a second. It bubbled up. Sanded it down, recoated it. It works okay for me. If you remember from last time, the engine kind of seized up. I was able to pressurize it with oil using a garden sprayer and get it to turn back over. But I knew something wasn't exactly right. So I had to look at some things, went through the engine, and after the valve covers were all the way done, and I put new seals back in them, new O-ring gaskets, because thankfully we're in the 2020s, or at least in the 2000s, and we use O-rings for things now instead of cork. Once it was all sealed up, I was ready to give things a try. This officially marks the first time that it's run mostly the way it should. It's running a little bit too rich because of the tune that's in there. It's an F-150 engine and the tune is for a Mustang. But remember, before all this started, it wouldn't run correctly, and that was because of a fuel filter problem. so it wasn't getting fuel pressure and it wasn't running on all the cylinders. I fixed that, tried to start it, and then it kind of stopped running pretty quickly. And then I had to go through and oil the whole engine and do that thing. So this is the first time in the history of ever having this thing that the engine is doing engine things that are wanted and expected and within all normal parameters. So, pretty big time. Front drive shaft is spinning just from residual, there's probably some technical term for it, lubricity and fluid dynamics and all kinds of stuff, but it's just spinning because of the thick new oil that is in the transfer case. So overall, pretty encouraging, pretty big time. Valve covers look great, a lot of good progress. Looks like a mess with the wires, I know, but that's all to be improved. Proof of concept here, people. Big deal. We're about to get some rain, so I'm looking at the engine, making a list of parts, going through things. A couple of updates, because it runs. I'm sure I will have shown those videos by now. On this remote oil filter housing, I'm not sure if I can get a good angle on it. It says in and out. There's a place for in, a place for out. There we go. Out. Okay. There's the adapter on the block. Come in through here. You can maybe make out where it says out. Oh. Okay, so after doing some reading of the instructions, the out line from the block is supposed to go to the in line on the oil filter, and the out on the oil filter housing is supposed to go to the in line on the block adapter. So makes a world of difference. My oil pressure sender is not working great, so what I've done with that is we're mounting it remotely. One, because it wouldn't fit back there, but two, because I want the sender to be secure and not put a lot of stress on the threads and ever have the chance of breaking off. So I'm getting a new sender, but when I was test firing it, it was bouncing between the gauge being totally off and 20-30 psi, which is a little bit low. Still going to change the bearings and everything in it, but I wanted to see if I could figure out the oiling problem. So that has been figured out, which is good. The fuel pump problem has also been figured out. I had the pre-filter on incorrectly, so figured that out. I'm going to change out this air intake eventually to a cold air kit that I have to move the mass airflow sensor, but that's not a big deal. Here's what we've got on the steering box so far. So the steering box was rebuilt. We've got this U-joint. Originally this was a big bucket type thing, and now it's a double D. So we'll get some just blank double D shaft and hook that up to the steering column. The plan back here, where there should be a firewall, is to mount the electronic assist power steering, the motor. It's going to be probably close to the floorboard, maybe somewhere up under the dash, and then that will come down here to the steering shaft. Might need to install a U-joint somewhere back here, not sure. We'll have to see. And then looking at the track bar and the steering linkage, I'm not sure if I'm going to weld a saddle on. So right now it's a full crossover steering. The steering linkage is supposed to go to that rod end that's not hooked up to anything. But the original stock Bronco suspension had the attachment point somewhere right in there. So I could build a saddle and make this bar go from here to there, essentially, paralleling the track bar. Or I could cross it all the way over there and raise the track bar. The big thing is those two links have to be parallel, otherwise your steering geometry is bad. And it will not drive well. Still might not drive well with this. It's TBD, but going to figure that out. I've got an AC compressor coming from eBay because I'm cheap, and it was $100. I talked to the people at Vintage Air. The Mustang compressor will work with their systems. The F-150 compressor, because it's a variable displacement compressor, will not work. So right off the bat, I know that cross brace is going to have to go, just like it did on the alternator side. I'm not too concerned about it because I'm going to box all this in. It's not going to be a big deal. The compressor will bolt there. I'm worried about the motor mount, so we'll see how much room we have there. And then I'll get some custom lines made that go to a Vintage Air unit that's mounted under the dash. But overall, decent progress. I wasn't planning on working on the engine too much, but I was a little bored. I just wanted to see if it would work and how it would handle with oiling. I've got a couple clamps and one adapter coming for the cooling system. The radiator I got is a cheaper aluminum version. I mean, you can get aluminum radiators for early Broncos with Coyote swaps for, you know, $600–700. I think mine was $150, but the lower outlet on the radiator is 1 3/4 inches. This tubing on the modular motor is all 1.5 inches. So I have an adapter coming for that. It's just a rubber reducer. And then I'll hook up the cooling system and let it run for a little while. I need to get the programming worked out, so I'm working with a tuner online, doing some data logs, figuring out where things are, and they're writing a tune for it and constantly updating and tweaking it. But with the base tune that's on the computer, starts, idles, sounds great. The exhaust has worked well. There are a couple of leaks on the V-bands, which is disappointing, but I read that you should really clamp the two halves of the V-band together and then weld them while they're clamped together so you minimize distortion. I definitely didn't do that. So I've heard you can surface them. Probably take a belt sander to it, give it a little surfacing, and then put some copper gasket maker on there. And I've got an actual muffler coming, so it sounds good right now, but I want it to be a little bit quieter. I want a different sound out of it. So the plan was always to put a muffler on. I just expedited that because I'm impatient and excited now. But that's kind of where this is at. It's a running engine. I'll show you one little trick that I'm working on this side. Since I had to cut the backing plates out of the door hinges, I got some 4 or 5 inch 3/8 bolts, and I threaded them in from this side, as you can see. I welded a nut on the hinge side, and that lets me get the door positioned with it closed. So with the door closed, I can kind of set the gaps, figure things out, and then as I loosen those really, really long bolts, it squeezes the door hinges tight, kind of clamps it together, and then lets me open the door to tighten the other bolts and lock it into place. So if you're at that point where you've had to cut out the backs of your A-pillars to get those rusty old backing plates out, decent option. Science has proved it at least viable. So that's where we're at for now. Gonna get the radiator hooked up, do some more test runs, and just keep moving along. So with the help of some wood clamps and the radiator adapters, I was able to fit things. The old Mustang fan actually, dimension-wise, went right up to the radiator, so there's a couple of details on how I got that to work, and the connector works with the engine control pack, so it's a really, really good fit and was kind of a serendipitous occurrence, but I was able to get it to run for a while. This fan is out of the 2011 through 2014 or whatever Mustang, and I was able to make it fit just by taking a hole saw, 2-inch hole saw, and ripping a couple of holes in it. It fits on this radiator really, really well. Radiators from eBay, like 150 bucks or whatever, and the outlets mostly line up. These are the stock Ford hoses. A little bit of trimming, and on our lower hose down here, if I can get it, there we go, there is an adapter on there. A little bit hard to see, but 1 3/4 inch to 1.5 inch hose adapter. All the modular engines are 1.5 inch hoses. The old school ones, as best I can tell, 1.75. So with that adapter on there, a little bit of trimming, everything seems to fit. I tried running it up to 190 degrees to see if the fan would kick on, and it did not. So I'm going to do a little bit of reading on that. But overall, really happy with that. That's just kind of a bonus. I had that fan lying around and I was going to junk it, but that's going to work pretty well, I think. It's going to be hard to tell and show you, but there is a nut welded on the other underside of that. Same thing on the other side. So all of these are going to get weld nuts on them, and if there's enough light, that's what they look like. So these will get welded into place, and that eliminates some of the problem of taking out the 23 or 25 bolts or whatever it is to get the top off. The $100 compressor from eBay came in, and this is off of a Mustang with the Coyote motor. I didn't know if it would bolt up to the F-150 Coyote because the front timing cover is different and there are small differences, but it does look like it will bolt right up. It looks like it won't interfere with that back motor mount, and I just need to take out that cross brace that is supporting the front cross member, and it should go on there. There's a company that makes custom fittings, and I'm thinking about making my own hard lines and hoses to run to the evaporator and to the inside and all that stuff. So good news on that front with the compressor though. I'm doing a check to see if the fan is going to come on. I don't know how well you can hear this because the exhaust sounds loud to me, but let's see if we can get numbers here. Coolant's at 187. I read that the fan for this control pack kicks on at 191, or sorry, 195. So we're letting things get up to temperature. Kind of a makeshift system, but test to see if that fan's going to come on. So the fan has come on, 195 degrees. It references cylinder head temperature, not actual water temperature sender, so we're on 195. Let's see if it comes down. Short random video. I'm trying to get this spring out. It's in the way of my radiator, and I'm going to use a hood pin type thing. So here is what's going on. Might be hard to see. Probably impossible. There's a ratchet back there. I was able to get a ratchet back there. Let's turn some light on and see. Nothing. Anyway, ratchet back there. Vice grip's on here. Not sure how that ratchet's going to come out ever, but it works. This is a moose. And there, all the pieces all out. The socket went back there first. 3/4. There it is. And then I was able to slide the ratchet back there and get a hold on that
I think that nut's supposed to be welded back there, but it broke off, so that worked. I did apply a bunch of heat to this before, that's why that spring is all deformed, and heat never hurts. So if you're having trouble, give that a shot. And now I can close the hood without hurting anything.
So with the engine running, the next section is a handful of rapid fire pictures. Worked on a bunch of body stuff. Here is what I was going to do for the inner fender structure, but I've decided up front to go with the original inner aprons. The dashboard in. There's some pictures later on of the modifications that have been made. This is my ingenious cable tie system for the tailgate instead of those old noisy metal hinge type things. This is a synthetic winch line. It's good for up to 1,500 pounds per strand, and it's going to hold the tailgate just fine. I really like it. Hand spliced all of that stuff. Dyneema rope. Closed up the gaps in the back, made the tailgate look good, so really happy with the way the body came out there. Still working with the door gaps and getting the doors aligned and getting all the metal work done there. This is the original transmission tunnel, and I changed the shape of the firewall, so this is my new computer mounting location, and it's going to look just like that. So I've notched it out. I have tapped it for bolts to hold the computer down, and I think it's going to work out pretty well. I did, as I said earlier in the video, I went back, recut out this pillar, and just ordered a new one and installed the whole pillar. You can see a before and after of the rust treat that I put back there. Here's just a fantastic shot of the engine. Really excited about how it looks. I think it's pretty. And then there's that pillar. Welded in, looks normal, looks good, looks as it should. This is the Vintage Air inside air handler unit. I got that to test fit and make sure everything would be okay with the firewall. This is a brand new door. There was a guy in Houston that was selling it for $100. It seems like everything costs $100 with this car. But it had a dent, he sold it. And here is a picture of the new tires. Internal tire pressure monitoring system to go with my Android head unit that I'm going to put in there. But some comparisons before and after. New Falcon Wild Peak tires. New 17-inch wheels. Some before and after again of the side of the car and how these wheels look. I think it makes it look a lot better. Honestly, the lifted Broncos have a huge gap in the front with the wheel well. I don't love the way it looks, but with these on there, it fills up that hole a lot more, and it ends up looking a lot better. You can see there, just kind of looks at home where it should be. So there you go. Those are the wheels and tires on there. And there's the head unit. So open source Android head unit. I'm going to integrate that into the dashboard so that we have all the comforts of a modern vehicle. Another side shot, just a good looking car. This is before a lot of the bodywork was done. We'll get into some more of it, but after some careful measuring and aligning, I did cut a giant hole in the dashboard. Sandblasted the rear, what's that called? Lift gate. Finished off sandblasting the tailgate. Did rust repair on the tailgates. Did some welding on the body to fill in the old spare tire mount holes. You can see that here. Pretty smooth process. Ended up going over those with body filler, obviously, and sanding down the body filler and making it fairly smooth. I think I can get it pretty good. Old mirror holes on the door, welded those up. This driver's side door is pretty beat up, but I'm going to try and use it. So making a lot of passes, filling in the holes. It was nasty back there. Someone had obviously done this before too. And then you get to the antenna hole on the fender. A lot of circular passes of welding, and it looks as beautiful as that. But, you know, when you take a grinder to it, it comes out looking okay. Took the top out and did some sandblasting on that. Here you can see the holes drilled for welding in the weld nuts. This is the grill, doing some welding on there. Miscellaneous pieces off of the car. A lot of back and forth, a lot of taking stuff on, putting it back on. Rusty door hinge. I think I'm going to, windshield. I think I'm going to replace that windshield hinge. And I've got some more work to do on that rocker. This rocker went on. I don't really love it. I didn't know what I was doing, so I might have to move it, but we'll see. That is actually the side of the tire carrier welded up. That's the driver door. Those are the holes in the back that used to be there. And maybe it'll get to the Bondo shots. There you go. So, lightweight body filler. Put on sand, repeat, blah, 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 blah. Grill gets sandblasted. Fenders got sanded down. Anything that was intricate, I blasted. And you'll see an after shot coming up here. It's pretty satisfying. As far as immediate gratification goes, sandblasting is up there. So with all this stuff blasted, I did not want it to sit too long. So this was the pre-preparation for epoxy primer. That hole in the back where they brazed the two body panels together, I cut that out. I haven't fixed it yet, but I will get to it. I'm just going to weld a piece of metal in there and make that look more normal. That's what it looked like before. So trying to cut all the rust out and repair that. Here are the front fenders. A lot of time with the DA sander, got those looking good. I sandblasted most of the rust off of the top that I could get to, and the top's pretty bad, so I've got some plans for that. A little bit of metal repair and maybe a little bit of composite work. Those inside braces, someone had cut them and moved them up to support the sheet metal of the actual top, because that old sheet metal gets kind of loose and tin can is what they call it, but pops back and forth. So they moved those, but the mounting brackets for them were all rusted out, so got to redo that. A little bit of body work on the rear quarter where there's a bunch of old dents and damage. You can see the door there getting covered up. I like body work. I've never had a problem with it. It's dusty and kind of dirty, but enjoyable. Like I said, it's gratifying. And it's not going to be perfect, but it will be good. So here's me welding the weld nuts on the windshield frame and then hanging everything up, getting it ready for a coat of epoxy primer. Now, everything's not perfect, but it's about 90% there. There's still some rust damage that needs to be fixed, but I did not want everything to just sit around in bare metal and have to retreat everything with sandpaper, sandblaster, whatever. So everything got a nice coat of epoxy primer, and I'll just go ahead and jump to it. That's where it sits now, with the exception of the rear lift gate. The tailgate came out okay. A little bit of repair to do on it still with body work, body filler. But everything is making progress. I did paint the rear lift gate Wimbledon white, and it came out looking good. However, I was storing the paint, and the can had a leak, and I lost all the rest of my paint. So I'm not sure if it's going to stay Wimbledon white or if I'll color match it or if I'll go a different color. Out of order because computers are hard, but here are the fenders getting down to their bare metal state before they were shot in epoxy primer. That's that antenna hole that was patched up, and they looked pretty good. They're, like I said, pretty straight fenders. A little bit of rust behind the side marker lights, you can see, but aside from that, really, really good shape on the fenders. And having them in epoxy primer will let me do a surfacing primer and all that sort of stuff. So, good steps all the way around. Here they go into wet epoxy primer. Best they've looked in 50 years or whenever 1968 was. I did find some cool Ford original stamping marks on the back of them, which was cool. So, a little bit of a neat discovery. Again, not perfect, but not worth me buying a new fender. I don't care. I want it to look a little rugged. Here's these support braces coming out of the top, and you can see just how bad they were. Someone literally welded the brace to the top. So I had to cut all those welds out, and then coming up here you'll see the brackets, or what was left of them, that were holding those. They'd been through a lot. So working on that, working on getting this firewall in. The sheet metal is cut. And, bouncing around, doing body work here and there. Finding a spot, putting down some body filler. Need to work on those wheel wells and wheel tubs. But I have got the top all welded on. All the weld nuts are on. I've rebraced this door. You can see the original brace here, and then the brace that comes in, because I noticed the top gap was too wide. So I put a ratchet strap on it, pulled that gap in, and I'm going to re-weld it. and that should help with my body lines. So I'm learning as I go. This driver side rocker went on, but it was no good at all. Didn't fit, and I just cut it off. And I went and got a Dennis Carpenter one, which is an original Ford stamping. And I'm going to fix up that weld area that's currently in body filler. There's the dashboard progress. Got the screen in there. There's the new rocker panel. We're coming to the end of it. Here's a side shot with the door, the primer. Here's the front end all in primer. So that's where we're at. Got to get the rockers solid. Got to get the inner fender aprons on. There's the firewall, welded in, mind you. And that's what it looks like right now. So projects are the same as they've always been, really. Have to finish getting the firewall welded in and then get all of the controls mounted in there. Brakes, master cylinder, clutch, master cylinder, pedals, gas pedal, steering needs to go in. So, and then with that, the electronic power assist system needs to go in. But it's getting there. Right now, the immediate thing that I'll probably do in the next couple of days is get the fenders set where they need to be and get that whole front clip welded in solid and reliable so that I can gap the doors. And man, then I don't even know. I can't even think about it. But it's a fun project. I'm not trying to, break any speed records. However, this is a 45-minute long video almost. And that means I guess I've done some work, which is good. It feels sometimes like nothing, but also a lot of times it's just me talking and rambling about nothing, like right now. But I don't really cater to an audience, and I don't care if you subscribe. And I would probably prefer if you dislike this video, because I don't get any money from YouTube, and I don't plan on it. But that's what the Bronco is doing. That's where it's at right now. I'm sure I left some things out, but we have a running engine, most of the body panels on there, and bodywork being done. So it's making a lot of good progress. And winter in Texas is very hospitable. So a lot more work can be done. Looking forward to it. I'll try not to be 10 months before the next update, but appreciate you watching. See you down the road on the next one.